समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
What is Triumph? What is S-400? And why is it so important that India has risked American sanctions to go ahead with this purchase? Also, it's not cheap. It's $5.2 billion worth for now, and we don't know as improvements come in, as more missiles come in, because this is the price being paid for a certain number of batteries, for a certain number of battalions, for a certain number of launchers, for a certain number of tubes, and I'll explain to you how to calculate that, and an unspecified number of missiles, because one tube can fire any number of missiles, and missiles are of at least 4 different types which India might be considering, but it could be 5 different types also. So, we will tell you about that. So, it's a very expensive purchase, very, very important for India, for India's not just tactical defense, but also strategic defense, not always, but also capable of stopping ballistic missiles coming in from the top. To that extent, this is comparable with the American THAAD system, THAAD. You will see the extended form on my screen. I am not repeating it, but this is much superior to THAAD. In fact, it was said at one time, there were rumors that the Americans said that if you cancel this deal with the Russians, we will give you the THAAD system, but this was seen to be better. Also, India likes an assortment of systems, so it doesn't become dependent on one source, because in the past, India's experience is that it's been much too dependent on the Russians. So, now you don't want to err on the other side. In any case, in its category, it is the best system in the world. It's acknowledged. I have read a lot of international defense media, a lot of the Western defense media, and all of that acknowledges that this is the best missile system you can buy for love or money in this category. So, right now, we are buying what is the best in the world. Now, what exactly is this and how does it work and how do we know it's coming? So, first of all, as you might have seen in a story done by our defense editor Snehesh Alex Philip, Dmitry Shugayev, who's a director of Federal Service for Military Technology Corporation in Russia, that is FSMTC, Federal Service for Military Technical Corporation, FSMTC. He told Sputnik, the Russian news agency, that some elements of the first 5 batteries that India has ordered are already in India and more is coming in. Now, what does a battery have? A battery has a long range radar, a target acquisition radar, a bunch of other radar systems, because this also tracks targets that are closer, targets that are lower. It's a very complex system, and each battery also then has 2 battalions. Now, a missile battalion in this case, one battalion has 8 launchers, right? 8 launchers, and each launcher has 4 tubes. So, calculate now, each battalion has 4 tubes, 2 battalions per battery, 8 launchers, that becomes 16. Each launcher has 4 tubes, that becomes 64. 16 fours are 64, 16 chok 64, as we would say in the language in which I learned arithmetic, and each launcher then has 4 tubes. So, 64 into 4, that is 256. So, effectively one battery is giving you 256 tubes to launch those missiles, and we don't know how many has India ordered, which types has India ordered, and I don't think we need to know either. Even if we knew, we will not talk about it unless the Air Force itself, for its own reasons, decides to talk about it. I am just telling you the capabilities. So we understand what does a battery mean. 5 of these are coming. So you can see how many launch tubes and how many missiles are going to be available. This is going to be a very potent new addition to India's air defense. That will tell you the kind of area each one of these batteries, presuming that it's somewhere there, can cover. So what it can do is, its long range missiles can hit up to 400 kilometers. That takes almost everything out within its range in Pakistan, right? And quite a bit on the Tibet side in China, not that deep because China is a very big country, but Pakistan is a narrow country. So this covers almost all of the Pakistani airspace depending on where this missile battery is located. The important thing is that the radar system that the missile battery has can detect a flying object up to 600 kilometers away. It cannot fire at 600 kilometers, but it tracks it from 600 kilometers, and then the radar and its computer plus the operator, man or the woman behind the machine. A lot of the people operating our missile systems now are women, right? So the man or the woman behind the machine and the computer and the radar then tracks this aircraft to see, it can make up its mind whether it's a hostile or not. What kind of aircraft is it? Is it worthwhile using such an expensive missile to bring it down? Notionally, if it was a Pakistani F-6, right, I'm not even sure it will be worthwhile using a 400 kilometer range S-400 to bring it down. Your missile will be a lot costlier than that aircraft. So this is the call that the computer, that the radar, that the operators have to make at that point, and as they watch it, once it comes in the range, they can fire. Now, if your adversary is able to evade this or flies low or uses other radar evading tactics and gets closer, then you have other target acquisition radars and radars that look closer, and an assortment of missiles. I will give you the whole list in a minute. An assortment of missiles you can reach depending on the range. Now, what will you do at 400 kilometers, right? You are not going to fire maybe at an ordinary fighter aircraft at 400 kilometers, but today's air warfare is network centric. So see what happened a day after Balakot when the Pakistanis came to challenge Indian Air Force at Nowshera. They put 28 aircraft simultaneously in the air over one limited theatre. Now these 28 aircraft are fighting and carrying out operations. On the other side, India had 2 Sukhois which were patrolling. India had 2 Mirages, I'm putting my fingers like this because Sukhois were south, Mirages were north, right? And between them there was a wide empty space, and that's where Srinagar Air Base launched its MiG-21 Bisons. 6 of them were launched, one of which unfortunately was shot down because Wing Commander Abhinandan, as we know, went across the LOC into Pakistani held territory and was shot down there. So 6 plus 2 plus 2, 10 on this side, 28 on that side. Now who's going to keep control of this battlefield, right? This battlefield in the air when things are flying at such high speeds, and mostly they are almost always beyond visual range. So what happens is the network then controls it, the network of radars on the ground and network of airborne radars. Pakistanis had their own airborne systems which were in the back. In fact, it's well known by now that they had an air vice marshal sitting on one of those directing the entire battle, because they had planned it, they had rehearsed it, they had war gamed it for many years, because they would have anticipated that one day India will retaliate for a big terror attack, and India will retaliate with what else but using Indian Air Force. So that was a planned war gamed scenario that they were addressing. On the Indian side also, these aircraft, and you suddenly saw so many Pakistani aircraft, and then maybe would have been necessary to launch more aircraft. So India also had airborne early warning and airborne control aircraft in the back. Those aircraft stay in the back, and those aircraft then identify the enemy and tell the pilots, fighter pilots, what to do. So fighter pilot then gets instructions both from the ground and also from these airborne platforms. That is how network-centric warfare works, because you don't see the other side. And in today's warfare, modern warfare, whoever sees the adversary first usually wins, as long as that side has the weapon to get that far. So the important thing, the force multiplier or force crippler in modern air warfare is that airborne early warning or airborne control system. If that is hanging around in the back, the other thing is the mid-air refuelers. So all modern fighter aircraft now use mid-air refueling because they can take off with a lot of load of weapons. They can be, they want to stay in the air for much longer, so they are refueled after taking off. Even the Indian Mirages who had gone to hit Balakot, they had been refueled in mid-air. So these refueling tankers, mid-air refueling tankers also become at that point strategic systems because they keep the battle going. Now, because they hang out in the back, you need a missile, however expensive it is, to threaten them or to take them out. So either they are within your range, so you can bring them down. If you bring them down, so if you bring down one of these special aircraft, a lot of personnel are on them, a lot of systems, radars, technologies there, then your fighter force, your adversary's fighter force nearly goes blind and they have no choice either to go back, retreat, or maybe to expose themselves to enormous amounts of risk. Similarly, if the tankers go, then they get into trouble, their range goes down, their time of operations comes down, and morale goes down. Now, even if the enemy evades it, if the enemy is conscious that you have missiles of this range, then the enemy has no choice but to hang back that far. When they hang back that far, it degrades the ability and range of their fighting forces. That's how this turns the balance of battle. That is the logic of a 400-kilometer missile in your armory. Now, where will these be put? Once again, we don't know and we are not supposed to know, but what we know is that these are mobile in the sense that each system comes parked on a multi-axle, multi-wheel 8x8 Ural vehicle, that is a Russian vehicle, and that can move quite fast for its size and what it carries, and it can move on uneven ground also. So what it can do is, because it can move, you remember that line shoot and scoot that was used for the Bofors gun. When it shoots and scoots, it does two things. One, it can keep changing the missile engagement zone. So it can keep the adversary on the edge because the adversary can't easily guess in what range you can fire now because you have a mobile platform, it can change the range. Second, because your adversary would also want to hit this installation with its own missiles, particularly surface to surface missiles, this mobility gives you some protection. Now, if you're a defense nerd, you will know many things about it. For example, this radar can engage or track 100 targets at the same time. It can engage 80 targets at the same time. It also has the computers which decide which missile to use for which target depending on who's, where and what will be needed. Now, how is India dealing with America? So, India's argument is that the agreement to buy this system from the Russians came in 2016 at the BRICS summit in Goa because Vladimir Putin and Narendra Modi talked on the sidelines of that summit, and there India said they want to buy this system. The American law, CATSA, came into being only in 2017, so it can't apply retrospectively. Also, that India has strategic autonomy. At that point, India had nothing else available, and this was easily available. In India and Russia have a relationship of mutual trust. Now, as you look at this, you have to also understand how Russian or how Soviet India's surface-to-air missile system is. If you look at the Indian Army, for example, everything the Indian Army has almost is of Soviet origin. I am deliberately saying Soviet because a lot of it goes back to Soviet times. It is that old. Now, what does the system has? Once again, I will not go into technical details because, first of all, I will then be rattoing and typoing and repeating to you. And if you are a nerd, you know better already. If you are not a nerd, then I don't think these are of such relevance to you. But just the basics, the radar system, it has the basic radar system is called 92N6E. I think the Russians do these things just to troll the Americans, because that is the reason NATO then has to find sort of code names for it which are simpler for Americans to understand and the rest of the world also. So radar system 92N6E, NATO calls it gravestone. Good idea, right? You get into a mess with it, you go straight down into your grave. This has been designed, the radar system and the entire missile system, by the Almaz Central Bureau for Marine Engineering, and the Russian forces first commissioned this in 2007. Now that means it's been already operational for almost 15 years. So in that case, you see what happens is when a system is very new, it takes time settling down. But this now has been tried and tested and improved over time. Then it has a bunch of missiles. I told you it has an assortment of missiles, like a buffet of missiles that the radar and the computer and the operators can choose from. So the most important 400 kilometer range, that's called 40N6E. Once again, why do Russians keep these names? I don't know. Don't ask me, ask the Russians. 400 kilometers. Then there is a 250 kilometers missile, that is 48N6DM. Then a 200 kilometer missile. Now I don't know how much is the difference between 250 and 200. That is 48N6E2. That's the reason I said technically they are 5, but effectively they are 4. So I will count these two as 1. I don't see an Air Force buying both of these. Then there is a 120 kilometer missile, that is 9M96, and then a quick reaction close targeting 40 kilometer missile 9M96C. So it's possible that one set of 4 tubes could be carrying 4 different missiles, right? So this gives you a choice to go wherever you want. Now also, because we know that this will also be a tempting and important target for the adversary, Russians are already developing a system called Morpheus or Morphe, which is called 42S6. Now that is the system that is designed to protect these batteries, which means that system then also tracks any missiles coming towards this battery, because this battery becomes a very valuable asset for the side using it, and a very valuable and tempting target also for the adversary. This Morpheus system has missiles, anti-missile missiles essentially, which can travel at 6.5 Mach, that is 6.5 times the speed of sound. S-400 on the other hand travels at 14 times the speed of sound. So even if there is a slow moving AWAC or something at the other end, or a big tanker at the other end, it's not so maneuverable that such a fast coming missile can be evaded. Now this choice of a Russian missile, despite the risks of American anger or despite the risks of basically irritating the Americans who are our strategic allies now, these risks may have also been influenced by the fact that currently Indian Armed Forces entire armory, the entire battery, the entire inventory of surface to air missiles is mostly Russian. So you can count them, and as I told you, all will have NATO code names beginning with G. So there is SAM-6, right? SAM-6, it's also called Cub. That is for short range, it's called gainful, NATO. SAM-8, Gecko, it's point defense, right? There's a helicopter coming right into the battlefield, you can target that. SAM-8, Gecko. SAM-9, SA-9, that's called Gaskin, right? SAM-16, SA-16, that is Gimlet or Gimlet. All these are with the army. Indian Air Force also has the SAM-3 Pachoras, which are also called by NATO Goa, and now some Israeli missiles in the Spider range.